Mention the name Cleopatra, and most people will conjure up an image of an exotic beauty, perhaps lounge around on a barge with one arm wrapped around her lover, Mark Antony, while the other caresses her pet crocodile. But not many will know much more than that. And yet Cleopatra was only the last of her line, the Ptolemaic dynasty, which ruled Egypt for 300 years at the tail end of the ancient world. But who came before them? If you're thinking the Pharaohs, think again. The 20th dynasty ended as early as 1100 BC, almost 400 years before Alexander the Great came along with his buddy, his half-brother Ptolemy, who would go on to found the Ptolemaic dynasty and kickstart centuries of Hellenistic rule over the Egyptians. And, to top it all off, according to official history, there was no ruling dynasty at all between 1100 BC, when the native rulers were overthrown, and Alexander's arrival in 332 BC. So, where did these 300 years go? What happened in Egypt after the pharaohs were kicked out? Did a secret society of priests keep control of the country in the shadows? Or was it ruled by a mysterious civilization known only to a few? Hi everyone, welcome, and please like and subscribe to support us. A small group of researchers believe that instead of a slow decline into chaos and anarchy, a prosperous and culturally rich civilization existed during this time period and played a pivotal role in building several monuments across Egypt. Who were these people? Where did they come from and what happened to them? Most importantly, how do we know they even existed? It all started with two men. The first was Dr. S.A.B. Chesson, who in the 1960s began exploring a vast network of tunnels sitting deep beneath the Giza Plateau. These tunnels are connected by shafts and chambers carved into the bedrock below the famous plateau and contain dozens of rooms and passages. They also contain a strange red granite sarcophagus with a humanoid-shaped object inside that has never been fully explored. While excavating this strange site, Chesney found broken pieces of pottery that were oddly similar to those found in Greece, specifically from the Greek Dark Ages. Now, this was odd because according to our understanding of ancient Egypt, contact between the two civilizations should have been non-existent. In fact, mainstream Egyptologists argue that after the collapse of the 20th dynasty, Egypt descended into chaos, famine, and anarchy, a so-called New Kingdom intermediate period where Egypt broke into smaller kingdoms and civil war was constant. By 800 BC, the Egyptian kingdoms were conquered by Libyans to the west and Nubia to the south, and although there's evidence that trade continued with the Levant and Mesopotamia, Egypt itself was a backwater, stuck in a dark age from which it wouldn't emerge until Alexander's conquest. But if this is true, then how could the Egyptians be using Greek pottery over 300 years before Alexander ever set foot in Egypt? Cheshire's investigation quickly hit a dead end, and he passed away in 1977 without any answers. But his work didn't go unnoticed. Czech archaeologist Miroslav Werner picked up where Cheshire left off and further investigated the tunnels and chambers. He noticed that they were built in precisely the same style as the Great Pyramids themselves, suggesting they were built at the same time and by the same people. But here's where things get strange. During excavations, Werner and his team discovered pieces of papyrus dating back to 2000 BC, depicting an alien sky god riding a fiery chariot across the heavens. This discovery was shocking for two reasons. One, archaeologists were already convinced that writing was invented independently by the Egyptians around 3200 BC, and hadn't resurfaced since its disappearance around 1000 BC. Secondly, the depiction of the sky god looked remarkably similar to descriptions of the Greek god Helios, driving his chariot across the sky from Homeric hymn number 2, a text believed to have been written between 650 and 600 BC. How could ancient Egyptians have predicted a Greek text written 600 years in the future? As if this weren't enough, another piece of papyrus was unearthed depicting a flying chariot drawn by two horses, very similar to the fictional chariots described by Homer in his Iliad. The only problem was that this papyrus predated Homer by nearly 800 years. In 1981, a team of Italian archaeologists led by Luigi Borch discovered a series of rock-cut tombs near Cairo containing dozens of sarcophagi. Some were simple, but others were extremely ornate. They uncovered a burial chamber decorated with hieroglyphics detailing scenes from Egyptian mythology, including Anubis leading the deceased before Ra. But the sarcophagus itself was clearly Greek, matching the style and iconography of Greek stone coffins from the Archaic period. Again, how could this be possible when the two cultures weren't supposed to have been in contact? When scientists analyzed the bones within, they found that the remains belonged to Caucasians, while ancient Egyptian mummies had distinctly African features. According to tradition, these graves should have been the final resting place of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, and his followers, but nothing links them to any such deity. All evidence points to ordinary Greeks laid to rest in elaborate tombs. To add to the mystery, the team also uncovered a collection of steel-yard balances used to weigh out grain. Analysis revealed that they were almost identical to those found in Mycenaean Greece. Once again, how could such advanced technology exist in ancient Egypt before the Mycenaean civilization reached its peak 800 years later? With all of these discoveries piling up, mainstream Egyptologists were forced to take notice, but instead of considering alternate explanations, they simply dismissed the evidence. Experts claim that the Greek pottery found in the Giza tunnels was brought to Egypt by European tourists during the Middle Ages. The steelyards were merely copied from their Mycenaean counterparts, and the sarcophagus wasn't even Greek. It was made by European forgers seeking to profit from the lucrative antiquities market. While the sky god papyrus is considered a fake by most scholars, some believe it is a misinterpretation of native Egyptian gods. As for the rock-cut tombs, well, experts argue that the Caucasian remains were actually Egyptian after all. No one bothered to explain why the Egyptians would suddenly abandon their traditions and bury their dead in Greek-style sarcophagi, nor why the Egyptians would have changed so drastically in appearance from one generation to the next. Although official narratives dismiss all of these finds as forgeries or misinterpretations, there is another explanation, one that leads us back to the mysterious underground city of Heracleion. If you've watched our video on Alexandria's lost sister city, then you may already be familiar with the fascinating story of Heracleion. Founded in the 8th century BC by Necho II, the city was strategically placed near the mouth of the Nile with the goal of controlling trade in and out of Egypt. However, after Necho's death, subsequent pharaohs neglected the city, and its importance waned. Then the 20th dynasty fell, and Heracleion became a backwater village. Now most Egyptologists agree that the city was completely abandoned during this time, but excavations have turned up fresh evidence of life continuing in the city right up until its rediscovery in 1998. Between 800 BC and 332 BC, Heracleion was home to a mixed population of Jews, Greeks, Nubians, Libyans, and Egyptians. Could this cosmopolitan community have survived the fall of the New Kingdom and maintained a cultural and technological exchange with the outside world? We know that the native Egyptians kept surprisingly accurate records of their history, thanks to the Turin King List, a papyrus detailing every single ruler of Egypt from the first dynasty all the way to the 22nd. However, the King List ends abruptly at 1100 BC and makes no mention of the next 300 years of Ptolemies, nor does it account for the missing dynasty of Shiksh. So the real question is, did the Egyptians simply erase their own history from the King List, or was it lost when the papyrus was damaged? Perhaps. Or maybe the entire document was planted to cover up the existence of the missing dynasties. After all, the kings of Egypt throughout its history weren't exactly known for their honesty. Even Ramses the Pigeon claimed victories over the Hittites in his own propaganda, even though the Battle of Kadesh was technically a draw. Perhaps this explains why. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already and check out our other videos. Thanks to our supporters for making this video possible.